Deep within the ancient forest, a massive male lion and his tiny cub were moving through a deadly blizzard. The father's powerful body cut through the deep snow, but his weeks-old infant struggled desperately to keep pace. The cub was astonishingly small, its tawny fur matted with ice and snow. It cried frantically, trying to follow its father through the whiteout. Then, in a single devastating moment, the cub lost sight of its father completely. It stopped and let out a desperate wail, but the sound was swallowed by the howling wind. There was no answer, only the merciless storm. The cub stood alone, its tiny body losing heat rapidly. Ice formed on its whiskers and ears. It stumbled forward, searching for shelter. Its movements became sluggish. Each step required monumental effort. The cub fell face first into the snow, struggled back up, but its legs trembled violently. Hypothermia was setting in. After stumbling through the endless white, the exhausted cub simply collapsed. Meanwhile, the father lion had realized his cub was gone. He turned immediately, golden eyes searching desperately. In another part of the forest, an elderly woman had ventured from her cabin to gather firewood. As she bent to pick up wood, something caught her eye, a small shape half buried in the snow. She approached cautiously. What she found made her gasp. A tiny lion cub collapsed in the snow, its fur covered in frost, its eyes closed, its breathing nearly imperceptible, between life and death. The old woman knew the dangers. A cub meant a parent was nearby, but looking at the dying infant, those considerations dissolved. It was a baby freezing to death. Without hesitation, she scooped the tiny cub into her arms. It was light, limp, and cold. She hurried back toward her cabin through the deep snow. She reached her cabin, pushed through the door, and slammed it shut. The interior was warm, heated by a crackling iron stove. She immediately set to work. She gathered soft blankets and laid them near the stove. She placed the cub on the wool and wiped away ice and snow. The creature let out a weak mewl, shivering violently. She added wood to the stove, building the fire higher. She retrieved warm goat's milk. She tore clean linen, dipped it in the milk, and pressed it against the cub's mouth. At first, no response, but she was patient. She continued dabbing milk onto the cub's tongue, humming softly. After several minutes, the cub's tiny tongue darted out. It began to suckle weakly. Relief washed over her. She spent the next hour keeping the fire roaring, feeding the cub warm milk, rubbing its limbs. Slowly, life returned. The shivering subsided, breathing deepened. Finally, the cub's eyes fluttered open, dark, innocent eyes looking up at her. She smiled, continuing to feed and warm the tiny lion. She wrapped it in the softest blanket. The cub, exhausted but alive, relaxed in the warmth and safety. Outside, the blizzard raged, but inside, a fragile life had been pulled back from death. Hours passed. The storm eased. The cub slept peacefully by the fire. The old woman sat nearby, watching over it. Then, as twilight fell and silence settled over the landscape, a new sound emerged, a distant vibration, a low rumbling from the earth itself. The sound grew louder, closer. Then came the roar of a massive lion, filled with desperation. The father had never stopped searching. Following deep instinct, he had tracked through the wilderness. He now stood outside the cabin. He had found his cub. Suddenly, a tremendous impact shook the door. Boom! The wood rattled. The lion had struck with his full weight, demanding entry. The old woman stood quickly, heart pounding. She looked at the cub, then the door. Fear gripped her. She knew what was outside. Hundreds of pounds of muscle and claws. She stood frozen. Boom! The lion struck again, harder. The wood cracked. A thunderous roar followed, a parent demanding his child. She looked at the peaceful cub, then the door. This was not an attack. This was a parent desperate to reclaim what was lost. The massive male lion filled her vision, golden eyes blazing, thick mane frosted with ice, breath in great clouds of vapor. Enormous, powerful, deadly. For one heartbeat, they stared at each other. Then, slowly, she knelt in the snow. She unwrapped the blanket and set the cub on the ground. Here is your baby, safe and warm. The cub, recognizing its father's scent, let out a joyful cry and stumbled forward. It reached its father's paws and pressed against them. The fierce expression softened. He lowered his head and began to lick his cub, checking it thoroughly. Then the lion lifted his head and looked at the woman still kneeling. For a long moment they locked eyes. She saw intelligence, awareness, recognition, and gratitude. The lion gave a soft rumbling sound, acknowledging. Then, gently nudging his cub, the lion turned away. He walked slowly toward the forest, the tiny cub following beside him. At the edge of the trees, the lion paused and looked back again. Then, both disappeared into the darkness. The old woman remained kneeling, watching where they had vanished. Then she slowly rose, brushing snow from her knees, and stepped back inside. She closed the door and latched it. The room felt quieter now, emptier. But as she returned to her chair and held her hands toward the fire, warmth filled her heart, not from the flames, but from knowing that in this brutal wilderness, compassion had bridged the impossible divide between human and beast, and a family had been reunited.